Hey, hello everybody, and welcome to another professional interview. Today I have another special guest, and I say she's special because she was the first person to finish my private investigation career course. So I appreciate that, and hopefully she learned a lot from that. But I wanted to bring her on because again, this is about folks who are in our field and doing things in our field, and she has some background that I like to talk about, and she can share some of her wisdom and some nuggets with you as well. So my guest today is Leia Ingram. She has a pretty good background. I'm gonna let her introduce herself and tell you about the background as well, but she's been military and been in this field for a little bit of time. So Leia, with no further ado, I'm gonna bring you on, let you introduce yourself, give us a background of who you are and what you do currently.
Basically, when I started in security and investigations, I was actually attending college at the time. I started at PG Community College, and I was going to start out as a computer information systems major. And then I was just like, let me just find a job that's going to help me pay the tuition. So I went into security that way. And that was in 2004, I believe.
So
then the year after.
That's about 16 years experience. Okay.
So the year after that, I actually ended up switching my major to criminal justice. And I can't remember exactly how I found out about private investigations, but then I ended up saying, hey, this might be a good career path. But there wasn't an easy way to get into the path, especially here in Maryland, where it's just like, hey, you have to have 5 years of experience and you have to have worked for a firm, et cetera, et cetera.
So tell us about your Navy experience. What did you do in the Navy?
I was actually an electrician.
Okay.
I had originally intended to go in to do law enforcement, but once you get to the processing station, they ask you what you want to do. I was a little indecisive at the time. Yeah. So I ended up going with something that was going to end up, getting me out of town as soon as I could.
And where'd you go for basic, by the way? I was in the Navy. I went to Great Lakes today.
Same place. I went to Great Lakes. It would have been 11 years this year. I went in April of 2010.
Are you still in your reservists now, right, or something like that? Are you still?
I actually left the reserves late last year.
Okay, and did you ever do electrician work on the outside?
I actually, when I got to the reserves, I actually switched to a different rate. It was more their admin rate, the yeoman rate, if you remember.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I remember the yeoman. The yeoman is gone. You say if I remember. Oh yeah, they still have yeoman, right?
Still got it.
Administrative person. So. Okay. And what are you currently doing?
Currently, I do work full time as a security guard with one of the major companies in the area. They've got an office. They have a contract with a realty company that owns a couple of buildings. I was previously stationed at the Washington Harbor, and then they just moved me to one of those buildings on H Street downtown. So,
okay. And I know you have a background as a background investigator. So tell us a little bit about that.
When I was coming out of the military, I seem to remember it was an online advertisement for the job. It might have been through LinkedIn. So I went ahead and I applied. It was one of the government contractors. I believe it was GDIT, CSRA at the time. So I went ahead, applied for it, did the phone interview, ended up getting it. And then once I came out of the military, I went ahead and I got started on it.
Okay.
So I was with them for about a year until I believe they were having some issues with trying to maintain the contract. So they ended up laying off people. So I ended up losing that spot.
So I did some background and investigation for a company before. So and I know how it works. But tell people a little bit about how that whole background system works. How do you get your cases? How it works a little bit.
Well, it's different from the personal background investigations that we discussed in the class. It's the FCRA compliant investigations. For those who don't know what that is, that's the Fair Credit Report Act. So you don't do the surveillance, and you don't do the dumpster diving, and you don't do the there's something else that you don't do with the FCRA investigations that you do with the personal background investigations, of course.
Like you can't use different sources and social media and stuff like that for those.
Correct. So depending on which agency you're contracted out to, like DOD has a different system, ICE has a different system, CBP has a different system. So when I was doing the employee side of background investigations as a contractor, they actually gave us a little flash drive where you could access the database where you got all your cases, you got your due dates, whatever items you need to work on. You might work an entire case, or you might work 2 or 3 items on a case.
Okay.
Like you'll get an education record, an employment record, and maybe a neighbor reference, or maybe you'll just get the whole thing.
Mm-hmm. So when I did those investigations, they used to send me my cases in FedEx. They FedEx my case to me. I do everything in the case and I FedEx it back. Is that how it worked for you?
You could FedEx it back. You would have to FedEx all of your notes back.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, they still do it that way.
Okay.
But they also
you were an independent contractor, or did you work for the company?
I worked for the company at first, and then after the layoff, shortly after I joined the Association of Certified Background Investigators, they actually had some recruiters there that said, "Hey, you can come in as a 1099 independent contractor." So I did that.
Yeah.
So I do that during the daytime before I go to work during doing security.
So you're doing it now?
Yeah.
Okay, because I know that was my next question. I know you were going back to that, and I know you had got hired for a company. You were waiting. That's better. I can see your face now. And I know you had gotten hired for a company, and you were you're waiting for your credentials and things like that. So you got those, and you're back to doing your investigations.
Yeah, I do those during the daytime, and depending on if they have a need for an investigator in the area, they'll call me and say, "Hey, we've got a few items lined up. If you want to work on those, let us know."
Okay. And I want to say this, that Leia has gone through my course, as I said, and with that, she's a private investigator with me. So she's certified with the intercessors, and I'm hoping to push out a lot of stuff this year because I'm doing, a lot of things to drum up business for, things slow down for COVID and all that. But I'm meeting with folks and trying to build that up. So she is one of my PIs, and I want to get her working when she has the time because, as she said, she has a few things that she's working on, and I want to do that. So with that brings me to my next question. What are you currently focused on and working on right now? What are some of the things? I know you're doing your security job. So what are some of the things you're trying to accomplish right now with this field?
I do really want to work as a private investigator, sort of transition out of security because, off and on, if you were to count my military time, I think that's like 15 years of experience.
Mm-hmm. So you really could get your own, because you said the 5 years Maryland need, but you really probably can get licensed in Maryland and Virginia and DC right now based on your experience, your background investigation, your PI work and all that. I think you can do that now. So
yeah.
So that's the goal.
Yeah, that's pretty much the goal. I'd like to work in the DC metro area as a private investigator. That's been a goal of mine since I first started contemplating a career as a private detective.
Okay. So I have a question for you. And I haven't asked the guys this because they're not guys. And you learned a little bit about this in my course, but what is it like being a female in this industry?
People look at you differently. I mean, they expect you to be a little bit lenient, particularly in security. They sort of expect you to be a little bit lenient because you're a female. Either you don't know any better, or it's that female nurturing side that we have. I try to balance it out.
Now, as an investigator, do you think that's to your advantage or a disadvantage?
I think it's an advantage because I know as a background investigator, when they hear me call them on the phone, saying, "Hey, I got to do an interview with you." And then when we go through the interview process, I always try to look for that common link between me and the subject, whether it's a male or female, or whether it's someone who served in the military, someone who's been a government employee, or someone who just might happen to have the same birthday as me, which has happened once. Yes. So, I always try to find a common link. It softens them up a little bit, and they seem a little bit more open to, sharing the information you need.
That's a great point you just make. One of the things they taught us in the academy, and one thing we learned is that the first thing we do is what? Build rapport. We don't just go in, "Hey, I'm Derek Smith. I need to ask you some questions. Let's get going." Man, how's the weather? What's your favorite team? Hey, you were in the military, so was I. So that rapport building is very important. So I'm glad you said that. And I brought that up because, one of the things I teach and one of the things people say is that if you have a PI firm or you work security, you really want to have women on your force as well. Sometimes they don't want to talk to a big black guy, and sometimes they think that woman is going to be more lenient. And she's the one that's going to probably go in and put the screws in and solve the case or whatever it may be. So you want to have a team of diversity made up of different folks that you can utilize to get the mission done. And it's all about getting the mission done and getting what we need for our client. So that's why I asked you a question. That's a good point you made. So that's going to lead me to this question. So what is one common myth about our profession or field that you would like to debunk?
If you were to think about the movies like Shaft and Trouble Man and maybe even Cleopatra Jones, I'm referencing like blaxploitation movies and all that stuff, but you could also think about maybe some of the other sort of noir mysteries from like the 40s. I'm into old movies like that. Mm-hmm. And if you think about some of the older shows, like maybe some of the older radio shows from like my grandparents' generation, mm-hmm. where they feature the hard drinking, two-fisted private eye. Okay, mm-hmm. that's all a myth because, we don't go kicking indoors,
right,
and, tossing people around to find information that we need. Mm-hmm. We're either turning on the computer, we're going to the courthouse, or we're tailing somebody mm-hmm. without any sort of conflict whatsoever, or confrontation rather.
That's a great point you made because some folks might think this is so glamorous, because they watch I'm dating myself, but Magnum PI or like mm-hmm. Shaft, throwing his badge and sticking it in the wall or putting a gun on somebody every time. And mm-hmm. we can't do that. We're not police officers. We don't have any, special powers that we utilize, anything like that. So we got to use more of this than a lot of this. And mm-hmm. I tell you this, a client, the client won't hire you if you're going around busting people in the mouth and things like that. That's mm-hmm. not realism, folks. So I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, mm-hmm. it's not going to be glamorous all the time. A lot of times it's going to be a surveillance, sitting out mm-hmm. watching somebody for 4 hours or 6 hours. And, and let me say this. I know I'm getting to an area that you probably want to hear about, but when you got to go to the bathroom and all that kind of stuff, you're on surveillance, you got to figure out how to do that. Because mm-hmm. that time that we walk away might be the time that person drives off. And then we're going to go sit for 4 more hours and the person been gone for 4 hours.
Because I enjoy those shows just as much as the next person does.
It's entertaining.
Very highly entertaining. And then maybe you can, follow along and figure out who done it next. But, mm-hmm. it doesn't happen in a matter of 2 hours or 30 minutes. It could take days.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, yep. And so you just touched on something else too. It takes perseverance because it could take days. On TV, every crime is solved in an hour. We're not solving the crime in an hour. We're not getting the surveillance. We're not getting what we need perhaps in that hour. It mm-hmm. might be days or weeks while we do this thing. So let me ask you, so what brought you to, I know you majored in criminal justice. What brought you to this profession then? What made you want to do this?
I think I've always had a natural curiosity for finding out things. Mm-hmm. Plus, as a hobby, I work with my family tree and everything. So, always asking the questions and then trying to get the facts, compile them all. Mm-hmm. And then I can't remember exactly how I ended up searching for, private investigation training back then, because, Google was basically new back then. Mm-hmm. So I ended up looking up the training mm-hmm. and, what the requirements were. I'm just like, this would definitely be a great thing to get into. Mm-hmm. I think when you have a natural curiosity to know about things.
Mm-hmm. So that's a good question, Dan. What do you think it takes to be, you said natural curiosity. What do you think it takes to be a good PI, a good investigator, a good security person in general?
You definitely have to have patience because I know you're going to want to solve it, like the quickest time possible. But when you have real time conditions, especially with the pandemic going on right now, it's taking maybe twice as long. Because there is one case that I just worked on where it took a little bit longer because, you're used to going to the office and saying, hey, by the way, I'm so-and-so, I'm working on this security clearance investigation. I need to have this record. Mm-hmm. But because some offices have closed down, mm-hmm. you have to either fax in or email it in. So, and that usually takes a little bit longer.
So it's taking longer. Are you still out there knocking on doors? They do client interviews and things. How are you handling client interviews now?
Now, when I handle interviews, it's usually they're over the phone because I know most people are concerned about whether whoever they come in contact with actually mm-hmm. has the symptoms. So. Mm-hmm. Okay. And they've actually given us a little bit of leeway. Be like, listen, if they don't feel comfortable doing it, you can go ahead and do it over the phone. So,
now what about this? What about something like a Zoom conference call or something like that, where you can do a face-to-face? Are they doing that yet out there or no?
Now, for the clients that we're contracted out to, we can't do the Zoom. Okay. So we would have to definitely do it by phone. Okay. Or if it's any, I guess, derogatory information that we had to go over with the subject, we have mm-hmm. to meet in person. but we have to observe the social distancing rules.
Okay. I guess they don't want, you can't really trust electronic means. Somebody could be taping us right now,
Mm-hmm.
or something like that.
Yeah.
So how do you keep up? How do you continue to learn in order to stay on top of things in this particular field? What's your method for staying in the know when it comes to all this stuff?
I listened to a lot of podcasts before I came out of the Navy. One good one is PIs Declassified with Francie Kaler. That's a really good one to start with.
Okay.
And then, I also do the old-fashioned way. I go and look for books on whatever subject within private investigations. Amazon and Google are going to be your best friends there. So
I'm a book guy. So what kind of training have you had? Talk about your training and even basic training in the Navy, but talk about the different training you had that's helped you in this career as far as, academies or whatever else you've had for your training. Because, the guy I had on before went through several police academies and things like that with me, as a matter of fact. So what was your training? How did you get trained? Now, you said you're criminal justice. So talk a little bit about your journey for training.
Now for the journey that I've gone through, most of my training actually comes from the security side, because they'll teach you how to do basic interviewing, basic report writing.
So you've gone through a security training course. Okay. All right. Now, what about your do you have a criminal justice degree?
Yes, I have my bachelor's.
Oh, you have a bachelor's in criminal justice. Okay.
Yeah, I earned my associates before I went to the Navy. And then before I came out of the Navy, I actually was doing some bachelor level coursework. And I just finished last year.
Okay. So I'm going to come back to that. So you have a bachelor's in criminal justice. I know before my PI course, you went to another PI course, right? Did you take?
I did I believe it was 60 hours in Virginia.
Okay. All right. And I want to touch on that. So, and then you decided to take my course. So I want to touch on that just for a second. This is a selfless plug for me as well. But what kind of things did they teach you in the Virginia class? Do you learn? Well, in my class, when you and I did it, we had a in-person class. Now it's online. And we talked about everything. We talked about surveillance. We talked about driving. We talked about a lot of different things. Do you get that same type? Because my thing, I hear a lot about the 60-hour courses that folks go through. And by the way, I just went through one 2 weeks ago myself, just to compare it to my class. And I'm being, of course, it's my class. I didn't learn. I went through a week of them showing me stuff, but I didn't learn anything. We did no report writing. They brought cameras in and said, hey, look at all these cool cameras. They brought in spy gadgets, like look at these cool spy gadgets. Didn't show us how to use them. A woman came in and talked about polygraph exams, but didn't, of course, teach us how to, use a polygraph. So it was like a show and tell for 40 hours, but I really didn't learn how to do anything. How was the class you had in Virginia?
Now, the class I had in Virginia was similar, but they also had us do a practical field exercise. They actually had us do quite a few.
Okay, good. Okay, so you went out and actually did some surveillance, followed some people around. That's good.
Yeah.
All right. So now I'm gonna ask you this, and I want you to be honest. What was the difference? What did you think about the course that I gave you when you went through my course?
I think your course is definitely more in depth. And because I had done FICRA investigations before, I actually learned more about why it's a FICRA compliant investigation, why the company would say, hey, you're not supposed to do this A, B, C, and D when you're doing these type of investigations. And it was just like, well, it all makes sense now. And then I learned the difference between the type of investigations that I was doing, the FICRA compliant ones, and then the personal background investigations where you get to do the dumpster diving and when you get to do the surveillance and the social media stuff.
Okay. Well, good. And of course, that's just a plug for my class as well, folks. But we go that. So you say you go now. Now that's how you say you continue to learn by reading books, by listening to podcasts. I assume watching YouTube videos and things like that. So what do you wish you had known when you began this career? And then my next question, of course. Well, let's start with that. What do you wish you had known before you began this career?
Now, when I joined the Navy, I had intended on going into the law enforcement rating, but now it's not really necessary to actually become a police officer to gain experience and actually work as a private investigator. All you have to do is just really put yourself out there and say, hey, I want to work for your firm. do you have any openings, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, not only that, you find that police work and investigations is two totally different things, right? And what do you think about that? I mean, what do you think the differences are between the police work and the investigator? I have my opinion, but I want to hear what your opinion is.
I think when you have like some, let's see, I'm trying to find a good way to answer this. I mean, that's a really great question, actually.
Well, what do police officers do versus investigators?
I mean, you usually when police officers show up, something's already happened.
Mm-hmm. And really, a police officer doesn't investigate, right? The police come and they get the first notes and things like that. They show up and they stop the violence if there's a fight going on or something like that, but they don't really investigate. Now they turn it over to the detectives and they investigate. But as a PI, even if you're a first week PI, you got to know how to do an investigation. You have to know how to do a surveillance. You have to know how to go out there and get that information. So really, my point is that being a police officer will expose you to some things. You write some rudimentary reports and all that. Mm-hmm. But investigations is an entirely different animal. My last guest, he said that he likes being in uniform and being a police officer and a first responder more than he likes being an investigator. And I understand that because the investigator, we got to do this long, drawn-out investigation. We got to write this long report. Even like your background investigation, the background investigation is only a small part of it. Mm-hmm. It's the report that you do that really counts, right?
Right, exactly.
That report you write is going to be turned over to your client, and that's what they're going to see. They don't care how cool your investigation was, how good you asked your questions.
It's all in the details.
The details in that report. All right. So that one thing you said you wish you had known when you began your career, I missed that. What did you say that thing was?
The one that was the one thing pretty much because I
wanted to be a police officer.
Because when I went started thinking about the private investigation field, it's just like, oh, okay, I got to go through the police academy. I got to become a police officer and actually do some detective work with them before I could be considered a private detective, that sort of thing. So I had planned all this out. And then when things got shook up a little bit, it was just like, but yeah, I guess maybe I can't get into the field. But then when I transferred to Virginia in 2015 and I had that opportunity to take that PI course in Virginia, it was just like, oh, well, maybe I don't have to become a police officer or become a police detective to actually get experience and training in the field. So,
and in Virginia, how many years I can't remember, how many years do you have to actually start your own company? You have to, I think in Virginia, you have to work with somebody for a while or two, right? How does it work for you out?
To the best of my knowledge, I think you do have to work with somebody for a while before you can start your own licensed agency.
Okay.
Rather.
Even if you have
But for the registration, you really don't need any experience. All you gotta do is just go through the course, take it, and fill out all the paperwork, and that's it pretty much.
So are you still licensed in Virginia as well?
Yep, still registered. I just renewed it about a couple of years ago, I believe.
Okay, cool. So you got Virginia and Maryland. And I can't remember what DC is. I looked at all these, but I can't recall right now. So, Leia, what's your goal in this field? What are you trying to accomplish?
I definitely want to be able to work in DC, Maryland, and Virginia.
Do you want
because it's pretty much an overlapping area. Because I was born and raised in the area, so I know most of the area, pretty much like the back of my hand. So, to have an opportunity to work in all three parts in the metro area, that would be great.
And do you plan to own your own firm or anything, or where do you plan to take the career? Are you okay being an independent contractor or working for someone else? What's your long-term game?
I like the independent contractor work that I do get with doing the background investigations. But I definitely really want to get my feet wet doing private investigations because that's been like the ultimate goal.
Okay. Yeah. Any particular specialty you like in private investigation? Like you have legal investigations, you have the guys who are just gonna be general and chase cheating husbands, cheating wives, find missing children. Do you have a track that you like to follow in the field?
I think right now I'm probably going to be more of a generalist, unless you have a place for me to do background investigations, which is something that I feel like I can excel at because I worked in it for so long. So.
And do you like the field?
Oh yeah, the first time I even found out about private investigations, I was just like, there's this exciting sort of, I had a little bit of an adrenaline rush when I found out about the field, and I still get the chills thinking about, how I ended up, taking the course. So, yeah.
And my last guest said that, people need to know that it's not always glamorous and fun. But
yeah, it definitely
have those fun moments, though.
You do.
Yeah. So, as far as training, are you trained in martial arts or firearms or anything like that?
I briefly took some martial arts in college before I went into the military, and then I also did take some Filipino martial arts and Jeet Kune Do when I was on active.
Okay. I love that.
Yeah.
Do you go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And then with firearms, I did have a endorsement on my PI registration in Virginia, but I'm gonna have to get requalified on that now.
Okay.
So
we'll look at getting you your Maryland too, because we can get that done. And of course, you know how you use a firearm because you were trained in basic training and you were in the military. So do you think we need those for this? For PI work, do you think it's really needed? And we talk about this in my course, but what's your thoughts on the firearms and the martial art thing or self-defense?
I think only in extreme situations where you're basically your life is being threatened. That's when you want to pull out those other weapons.
Because as a PI, if we have to resort to weapons and hand to hand, we pretty much failed at our job. Unless you do protective service operations or something like that, you really don't need to have firearms. And I know a lot of folks get into this field. I have a lot of folks who come to me and they want to get into the field because they want to be able to carry a gun. I'm like, guys, if you coming in, and ladies, if you coming into the field because you want to carry a gun, this is not the field you want to be.
Yeah, this is definitely not the field where, you're going to be carrying a gun 24/7, or you're going to have to get in and, beat somebody up with your hands,
Then we got a problem,
Yeah, okay, because this is more of a thinking person's, occupation.
Yep, I'm glad you said. The last guy I talked to said, this is our weapon right here.
One of the greatest weapons we could have is right up here.
It's not about how big you are or whatever. It's about how you can get the mission accomplished the easiest way possible and get to the truth, and that's what we're trying to do. And
if anything, I would much rather de-escalate a situation first before it gets out of hand. I'm one of those people that wants to talk people down and talk my way out.
Yeah, I'm 6 foot 270 with black belts, and I want to de-escalate and talk person out. I don't want to be rolling around the ground fighting anybody else, anything like that. So, what advice would you give to somebody then who's just entering this field with all that all of you learned? You know how you got in. How would you tell somebody to traverse it now coming into the field? What advice would you give?
I would say definitely do your homework. Definitely talk to actual PIs who have, been in the field for quite some time. Because
why
I know
one. Yeah, go ahead. Why is that?
Because you're going to get the people that are going to be like, well, when you're a private eye, you got to do this, you got to do this, maybe you're going to be carrying a gun 24/7. They might have some people out there still walking around that have that myth that hangs over the PI field. And then you've also got the bad apples that have popped up in the field, since its inception. Because, there's one PI out in Hollywood that's in federal prison now for doing some really shady stuff.
Yes.
Okay.
And I know this is kind of touchy, but I just, on one of the groups saying, they just posted yesterday about, I can't think of her name, but it was a woman who was accused of killing her own child.
Casey Anthony.
Yeah, she's now in the PI field.
A PI.
Because she can't get a license, but she's doing research, and she got, she was with some famous PI who taught her how to do it. Now she's trying to get to our field. So, so sometimes there are people in the field that taint the field. And the
last thing you want to do is enter into this field and then you lose your sense of ethics and your sense of morality, because we have great responsibility, because we have access to information that most other people don't. So that's going to give you a false sense of security and a false sense of power. You don't want to come into this field and abuse that power.
Yep, you're absolutely right. I work for the IRS full time. And I have access, of course, to your tax information and all that. But it's unethical and against the law, and I can go to prison for using those things. You think it's not tempting to see what Obama makes or what Donald Trump makes or some Hollywood star or something like that? Number one, they know I
Definitely
did it.
different.
Yeah,
Mhm.
you want to know, but you better not look at it,
Right.
But you made a great point, because my other guest, Charles Robeson, said the same thing. One of the best things you can do is talk to people that's been in the field for a while and see what that field is really like. Because you have your idea, your television idea, or whatever idea it may be. You have an idea, but you don't know the reality until you talk to somebody who's been doing it.
Yeah, you got the myth and then you got the truth.
So I think that's really important. So I want to ask you, what was your biggest failure in this field, and what did you learn from it?
No big failures in particular. Well, at least not related to this field.
So is there a reason why? I mean, is it because you had like a systematic approach? You kind of knew what you were going to do? Let's say this then. What has made you successful so far? And you got a lot more you want to do, but what's made you successful so far in your chosen profession?
I guess being successful in this field, what's made me successful is the fact that I'm not one to really give up easily.
Okay. That brings me to a good point then. What do you think I don't know if I asked you, but what do you think it takes then to be a success in this industry? What kind of characteristics do you have to have?
You definitely have to be willing to reach out to people, because it's not easy when you're introverted a little bit like I am. It's not easy to make that phone call to, reach out to somebody and say, hey, I'm so-and-so, I'm doing this, I'm going to need some information from you. When can we meet? And you do have to go outside of your comfort zone a little bit, because that was something that I struggled with when I joined the military. I was just like, do I really want to do this? I'm a little older than most recruits. So you have to be able to really push outside of your comfort zone.
Okay. So that's a good point. So good communication skills, but I think you made a good point, because some people who are introverted might think this is not for them, because you got to be talking to people. You got to be meeting people and all that. But you're saying, hey, you can do this. You just got, I guess it's a little bit more difficult for you. Like, I'm a talker. So I guess it's a little bit more difficult for a person who is more introverted, but you can't do it, right?
Yeah. Oh, you can definitely do it if you're introvert. You just be your natural self as an introvert. You don't have to say much in order to get what you want. Once you develop that rapport with someone, that's when you're able to get comfortable and really, get to where you need to be. Like, you need that piece of information. So.
And you said a good point. It might actually be an advantage for you, because people like me sometimes talk too darn much. Like you said, you don't have to talk a lot, because we should actually do less talking as an investigator and let our subject do most of the talking. And it would be sometimes I want to start talking. I'm like, wait. You've been trained to shut up and use these instead of this all the time.
Instead of this all the time.
It's easier for you.
Yep.
That's cool. All right. So I have another. So this has been really good as far as getting information out to folks and showing folks what this career is really about. If you were in my shoes right now, what is one thing that you would have asked yourself that I might have forgot to ask? What would you like to leave people with as far as this field is concerned?
I know for me personally, since I started out as a computer information systems major, is like, why make the switch from criminal justice, from computer information systems to criminal justice, especially if we're starting to see more as private detectives, cybersecurity issues and, stuff related to computers, pop up more in our cases. If you could have stayed with your computer information systems degree, there's a way of using it within the PI field, because you're starting to see more computer related issues pop up as well.
What you saying that, do you think you want to get more, start utilizing with, let's say, digital forensics or cybersecurity? Do you plan to incorporate that into what you do? So
I have definitely considered that. I have definitely considered that, because I know there's some sort of certification where you could use your physical security experience, and then you could also use what I did as a background investigator. You could merge the two, and then you could use it in information system security. So I've been, dabbling with the idea of doing that.
Because you have a great back. When you look at your investigative along with your with your information system skills, you have a great skill set. Because that's the biggest thing. Now, number one, I'm in cybersecurity. So when you take cybersecurity, but you have an investigative mind, it's going to work for you. And one of the biggest thing I always say with my students is that, you know, and I'm talking about my cybersecurity students, it's easier for me to take an investigator and turn them in, or a security person and turn them into a cybersecurity person than it is for me to take an IT person. The IT person understands IT, but they can't think in security. They can't think in law enforcement. They can't think in, and we talk about cybersecurity. We talk about taking a bad guy and trying to keep him from breaking into your system. So you got to be able to understand how bad guys think.
Yeah, that's pretty much just the physical security, because you always have to be able to keep an eye on the building. You know, what are the weak spots? You know, different entry points, different exit points, that sort of thing. So you do have to think like a criminal.
Now I said I wanted to come back to something. You have a criminal justice degree.
Yes.
What was your intention with the criminal justice degree, and what have you learned about the criminal justice degree? And I'm going to talk about that, why I asked you that in a second, but I want to get your opinion first. What do you think about that degree, and what did you learn from that?
Originally, as I said before, I had planned on going into law enforcement at some point with the degree. But now I feel like my criminal justice degree is still going to be of some good use with the private investigations and with background investigations. Okay. I still think it's still going to be very useful.
Okay. The reason I asked that question, because I know I wanted to get a criminal justice degree, of course. And I learned that criminal justice is about the justice system. It's about how to run prisons, how to, you know, the justice system more than it is about investigation. Do you agree with that, or did yours actually get into investigations at all? It was about the administration of justice more so than about the being an investigator.
They did dabble in investigations just a little bit, because you do have to, you know, as a part of the prerequisite to getting a degree, you do have to take an investigations course. Okay, but then you also have to take different law courses as well, which the law is going to play a big part in being a PI, because there are certain rules that you do have to follow, and then there's some of the legal cases that you might work on as a legal investigator. That training is going to help as well. So
that's a great point, because a lot of people think they can go through this 40-hour course and they're ready, you know, but you got to understand law. If you have legal clients, you got to be able to speak their language and understand what they're doing. You know, they're going after the elements of proof and trying to bring this to justice, where we thinking we just got to go take some photos and do an interview. We got to keep in mind this interview is going to be used for a particular purpose. So I think that's the point. I don't know if you noticed, but the FBI, they take folks who are accountants, IT people, and all that before they take someone in criminal justice. They frown upon you getting a criminal justice degree. They like, we'll teach you the investigative part. We need you to have these other skills like accounting or law. And that's kind of why I asked that question. You felt that valuable in your field, and you do, because you learning about the justice system as well as investigations.
And then when I found out about cybersecurity, I'm just like, you know, this might be a good field for a PI to get into, because of the ever changing, you know, field. You know, you get more technology involved in our investigation now. Now, back when I first found out about private investigations, they didn't have the social media investigations, forensic investigations and all that stuff.
Everything was walking around and asking questions, you know?
Yeah, it was all pretty much just, you know, put your feet to the pavement and start asking questions, you know, typical courthouse runs, stuff like that. So.
Well, again, I appreciate it. This has been another great interview. I think people, you know, I just started doing this and I got a lot of hits and a lot of views, and a lot of people have been sending me emails and saying, do more. So I appreciate you coming on and doing this, because I think everybody I talk to is interesting. Everybody has a story and contribute, and we learn from everybody. So I really appreciate it. And I appreciate it because, you know, we really need more women in this industry as well. And I like for them to see somebody who's successful in it, who's doing it, and who actually enjoys it and get that point of view. So I appreciate that as well. I thank you very much for the interview.
All right. Thank you, Derek, for the opportunity.
Here's my question. Would you like to have any type of contact information where people can reach you or anything? You can tell them, and I can put it below.
They could definitely reach out to me on LinkedIn. Just search for my name, and then you should be able to find me there.
And spell your name, because your name is spelled a little bit different. So spell.
It's spelled Leia.
Leia, okay, not Leah or anything like that. Leia.
Just like from Star Wars, Leia. So if you're a Star Wars fan, you're gonna remember.
Oh, is that it on Star Wars? I didn't know that. So you can find her there, and she is active in some of the groups as well on Facebook. So you see her floating around a group. She's in my group as well. So again, thank you, and I'll see you soon.
All right.